Well, hello everyone. Got a bit of a different kind of video for you today. As the title suggests, I am going to be ranking the Star Wars movies, and I think you're going to find that it's a pretty controversial ranking. My ranking is not the kind that you will typically see made by other people. I am going to have some very probably confusing choices, especially when we decide how to rank the prequels. And I'll be honest, I don't have logic for all of it. Uh, I can explain some of it, but most of it's just going to be how I personally feel. It's an opinion. We all have them, and there's no such thing as a right or wrong opinion. Getting right into it, I will say that I'm only going to be ranking the 9 episodic films and the 2 spin-offs. I will not be ranking the Clone Wars movie. Yes, technically, it was a movie that was in theaters, but really it was a film that was just a combining of the Clone Wars episodes. And I think that if you are going to rank it, it makes more sense to rank it against other Clone Wars episodes and not against the Star Wars movies. That's my personal opinion. I know when some people do these kinds of lists, they do include the Clone Wars movie. That's their call. In this case, I'm not going to do it. So, getting right into it, when you talk about ranking the Star Wars movies, and really when you talk about which one belongs at the bottom, it seems like most people decide between one of two choices. Do we put Last Jedi at the bottom, or do we put Rise of Skywalker at the bottom? Now, I'll be honest, I used to go back and forth on this, but I think that it makes sense to put Last Jedi at the bottom slot number 11. So right there. My reasoning for putting it at the bottom and not Rise of Skywalker is because I think I cut Rise of Skywalker a little slack. It was put into the terrible position of having to clean up the mess that was left by Last Jedi. The problems with Last Jedi are numerous. We all know them. The destruction of Luke's character. It was the beginning of just tossing the character of Finn to the side. They built him up in Force Awakens and then decided they didn't want to do anything with him, introducing new characters that no one cared about. It was just not, it was altogether not a good thing. And one criticism I have of Last Jedi that I don't see talked about too much is that it was the only Star Wars movie of the main 9 episodic series to pick up immediately where the previous one left off. You go immediately from episode 7 to episode 8. And I think that was a big mistake. You know, arguably, Last Jedi doesn't even need an opening crawl if you're going to do that, because the whole point of the opening crawl is to fill the audience in on what has happened previously. But in this case, we already know what happened. That's my view of it. And I will say, and this is true of all the sequel trilogy movies, even though I'm not a fan of them, a lot of people aren't, the visuals of the sequels were amazing. Credit where credit is due. Some of the easily probably the best visuals of any of the Star Wars movies. Some of the battle scenes were absolutely fantastic. The scene in Rise of Skywalker where Palpatine shoots lightning into all of the ships in space and in the air, absolutely fantastic. The special effects team, ILM, props to you. You did a great job. My criticism is the story. And then there should be no question, since I've already talked about it, Rise of Skywalker goes at number 10. What's funny is I remember when I walked out of the theater of Rise of Skywalker, I actually initially liked it. I think I even said to a friend that it was, I think, my personal favorite of the sequel trilogy. And then when I got home, I started to think about it. I was like, wait a minute, what the hell happened? You've got Palpatine just randomly coming back. Snoke, what we just get no backstory on him. Kylo Ren and Rey are now a romantic thing. You've got Han Solo coming back. Now, to be fair, that was kind of a last minute decision due to the death of Carrie Fisher. Can understand that. Cut you a little slack there. Somehow Palpatine returned. We've always memed on that line. Although it was pointed out to me recently that in the context of the scene, that line actually isn't as stupid as maybe the internet has claimed it is, because they're not saying to the audience, oh, we're not coming up with an explanation for how Palpatine is back. In the context of the scene, none of the New Republic or the Resistance know how Palpatine's back. So to them, it's just, well, somehow he's back. We don't know. And when it was explained to me in that context, I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. Still, his explanation for coming back, they definitely could have covered that a little better in the movie. Also, now Rey is related to Palpatine. She's his granddaughter, but really her dad was a clone of Palpatine, but you'd only know that. You don't know that from the movie. You have to read some other stuff, and I've always had problems with tying major plot points of the Star Wars movies to stuff that's not in the movies. And really, all it was just a conclusion to a trilogy that didn't have any vision when it started, and that's the biggest mistake of the whole sequel trilogy. They went into it without a clear plan as to how the movies were going to flow into each other, and it really shows, unfortunately. Okay, let's talk about some good things now. What's my favorite Star Wars movie? And again, usually when this question is posed to people, one of two choices is selected. Do you like the first Star Wars, A New Hope, or is it Empire Strikes Back? And here's where my list is not in the majority. I am in the Return of the Jedi is the best Star Wars movie camp. I know that's not the most popular opinion, but that is my view of it. Some of it is logic-based, and some of it's just how the movie makes me feel. I think it's a perfect movie. I'm not ignoring the criticism that it's essentially a rehash of A New Hope, especially, they just bring the Death Star back and they have to blow it up again, and that's fair, but let's compare the two. In A New Hope, the final scene is just the space battle, them taking out the Death Star. In Return of the Jedi, it's several things. You've got the space battle and the Death Star, and this time the Death Star doesn't have a clear-cut weakness. Its weakness is that it's not finished yet, so they're flying in between the half-built Death Star. You've got the battle going on between Vader and Luke and the Emperor in the throne room, and you've got the battle on the Endor moon. I think that is a great way to pay homage to the original movie without just a straight rehash, so I don't think I completely agree with that. The entire first opening act is excellent, with rescuing Han from Jabba's palace, and seeing, the great battle scene and Leia killing Jabba, getting the confirmation that Luke is Darth Vader's son. I just love the movie. I've seen it numerous times. It's not just my favorite Star Wars movie. It is my favorite movie ever. You can feel free to disagree with me on that. That's perfectly fine. It's just how I feel. As I said, this list is going to be a mix of logic and a mix of just feelings. So what goes into number 2? Well, for me, it's the original Star Wars. What is there for me to say that hasn't been said already? It's the movie that started it all. The franchise that we all know and love would not have existed if not for this movie. If you're not familiar with any of the behind the scenes of the original Star Wars, please go and watch some documentaries or read about it. I mean, that movie was in hell. Production hell. No one thought it was going to succeed. Even George Lucas didn't think it was going to be that successful, and it ended up being, at the time, the most profitable movie ever, I think. It introduced us to amazing characters, introduced us to terms and music that we still know today. I don't know what else there is to say other than it's such an amazing movie. All right, what goes into number 3? And here's where it gets even more controversial. You'd think I'm going to put Empire there. I'm not going to. I am going to put Revenge of the Sith at number 3. I'm going to be honest. Don't get me wrong. I love Empire Strikes Back, but I've never felt the amount of love towards it that a lot of Star Wars fans do. Whereas Revenge of the Sith, and to be fair, I grew up with both the originals and the prequels, so there's going to be some bias there. Revenge of the Sith is an amazing movie. It visually is amazing. I know that people often criticize the CGI of the prequels, and while I think that criticism is fair for Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, you've got to separate Revenge of the Sith out from that. Revenge of the Sith CGI is on a completely different level. Not only is it, I would argue it stands up today, I would actually argue that it's better than a lot of the CGI we're seeing today. particularly the General Grievous shots and the opening space battle. I mean, those are amazing. It's got amazing music. It finally explains to us how Anakin turned to the dark side. Now, I'm aware of the criticism that it felt a little rushed, and from the movie standpoint, that makes sense. Again, this is some bias. I also grew up with the Clone Wars show, and to me, it helps fill in the gaps, but since I said earlier you should rely solely on the movies, yes, it is a little rushed, but I don't think it necessarily doesn't make sense. It does make sense in the story. Anakin is turning to the dark side because he needs the power to save the one that he loves. It's a simple concept, but I think it works very well. The lightsaber fight is impeccable. All of them really, but particularly Anakin versus Obi-Wan. I would need to double check this. I know it was at the time, and I'm pretty sure it still holds this record as the longest continuous sword fight in movie history. So I got to give it points there. And it has the darkest ending of any Star Wars movie, and I generally like a darker movie. And I've always thought that's interesting when people talk about how good Empire is, and like you say again, Empire is great. They always say, oh, Empire's dark Star Wars movie. They always talk about it being dark, and then I often notice people kind of move on. Empire's dark, but is not Revenge of the Sith dark. But while we're talking about Empire, let's put it in at number 4. It's a very close. Honestly, I kind of want to do this, but since I'm going one line at a time here, I've got to put Empire at number 4. Empire is one of the greatest sequel movies in history. The greatest twist, arguably, in movie history, that Vader is Luke's father. Builds on the stories of the characters that we know while introducing 2 new ones, Lando and Boba Fett, who themselves are fan favorites. We get more of the Han and Leia love story. In the movie, it's more of a triangle, but now we know why that shouldn't happen. It still grosses me out every time I see them kiss each other. Luke and Leia, that is. And I mean, we get to meet Yoda. I said introduce 2 new characters. I can't believe I just forgot Yoda. 3, the great Jedi Master himself teaches Luke Skywalker. We get the amazing fight between Vader and Luke. The opening scene on Hoth is amazing with the walkers. I mean, the Imperial March was introduced in this movie, one of the most iconic pieces of film music ever. I mean, how many things has that song been used in? It deserves its number 4 slot. And at this point, I don't think I said this at the beginning, the only 2 Star Wars movies that I would say I don't enjoy are these 2 right here. The rest of these movies I'm going to be complimenting, even Solo. They're movies that I enjoy, and I think we all enjoy. And I'm going to say this, if you enjoy the sequels, don't let my opinion stop you from enjoying them. I've always had a problem with people who say, oh, I don't enjoy this, so I'm going to try and tell you that you can't enjoy it. No, don't. If you enjoy it, power to you. I know some people who love Last Jedi. Good for them. All right, number 5, and I think this is when you're going to take a look at the list and think I'm insane. Phantom Menace. And you realize I'm putting Empire Strikes Back and Phantom Menace right next to each other. I can't explain it. Honestly, when I was first making this list, I was seriously thinking, should I put Rogue One here just to not have these 2 next to each other? But don't get me wrong, Rogue One is great. I love it. But Phantom Menace, I've never had the hatred towards it that so many people do. I kind of think Jar Jar's funny. Little too cringy at points, it's fair, but he's a funny guy. This was the first Star Wars movie that introduced us to the wider world of the Jedi. You know, the original trilogy, it's limited. We only have a few. This one shows us the Jedi Order, not necessarily at the height of its power, but certainly in a more powerful position. We get more of the intricacies of how the Republic was falling, and we begin to see how the Empire could form out of it. What's interesting is a lot of the slow aspects of the prequels that they were heavily criticized for when they came out are things that I've noticed many people my age actually really enjoy. I love the political scenes personally. Now I'm a bit of a political junkie, to be fair. I know this channel's not a political channel. We'll leave it at that. But I actually do enjoy the politics of the prequels. And of course, Darth Maul is in this movie. One of the most badass Star Wars characters ever. He's got the double-bladed sword. Duel of the Fates, one of the most amazing songs in Star Wars. Let's be honest, Star Wars doesn't make bad music. John Williams is a master of his craft, but Duel of the Fates is, come on, it's awesome. And yeah, I don't know. God, trust me, I know how weird this is and how stupid it is that I'm putting these two next to each other. This is a case of my own personal feelings about it, and I kind of have to say, like, if I had to choose between certain movies to watch, this is what's forming the ranking. If you want to dislike this video, comment, call me insane. I'm expecting you to do that. All right, Rogue One, number 6. Rogue One is one of the best pieces of Star Wars that Disney has produced. It's not without its problems. In my opinion, I remember when it came out, I was very critical of, in my view, the plot hole that it created. I'm still not the biggest fan of them making the Death Star's weakness an intentional design by a saboteur. I always preferred it's just an oversight, and that shows the arrogance of the Empire and the rebels being able to exploit that. And part of my other reason, my problem with it, is Attack of the Clones established that the Death Star plans were at least had some form because we know the Geonosians helped design them. So my whole thing is, obviously the Geonosians did not build that weakness in. We know that Galen Erso had problems with the Empire. They had to force him to come back and work on it, so you'd think that they'd be watching him like a hawk. How would he be able to design such a serious flaw without them catching it? You would think that him putting that kind of change in, that they would have someone go and look at that. Maybe that, again, is a way to speak to the arrogance of the Empire. I've always had a problem with that. Okay. That's my criticisms of the movie. Now, let's talk about the great things. All the characters in it are perfect. K2SO, Jin, Andor, all of them. And what's interesting, and maybe this is just because I assumed it going in, but I remember that some people were shocked when all the main characters die at the end. I was expecting that to happen. I feel like I even read somewhere, and I saw it opening night, that was going to happen. Maybe I misread it, or it was just a weird assumption to have, but I will say, again, we're talking about dark movies. Props to Disney for letting them do that, because it makes perfect sense that they would die getting the plans to getting the plans to Leia. It's an amazing standalone movie. What's interesting is when they announced the Andor TV series, I didn't want it. I figured, no, Rogue One is standalone, introduces the characters, leave it at that. And then Andor turned it out to be awesome, so what do I know? Okay, number 7, Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones is the weakest of the prequels, no doubt about it. The Anakin-Padme love story is a little weird in it. Of the prequels, it's got the weakest lightsaber fights, though I still think they're pretty cool, especially getting to see Mace Windu with his purple saber. But even though, we often criticize the Anakin-Padme aspect of it, I think the Obi-Wan side of it is actually pretty well done. His investigation of learning, this is, okay, some Jedi who's dead, he ordered the creation of these clones, and we as the audience we know who they're going to become. And further, we get to see Palpatine getting more and more powerful, and getting to see Christopher Lee in action. It's a good movie. It's not as good as the other prequels. I think number 7 is a good spot for it. I've got a good friend who puts it's his personal favorite Star Wars movie, like above the original trilogy too. I don't know how he does that, but that's his opinion. All right. This one I really struggle with. You can think it's weird. Because I seriously wanted to put Solo here, but I can't do that in good conscience. Force Awakens goes here. Now, I'm going to tell you something. If I had made this list back in 2015 when all we had was Force Awakens, I probably would have put Force Awakens much higher. I think it's so easy to forget when we criticize Disney Star Wars today. We forget how awesome it was in the early days. Last Jedi was the turning point. Force Awakens was a good movie, and I will state that it is still a good movie. It's hard to watch now because we know where the story's gonna go, but as a movie, it was amazing. It brought back the old characters that we loved, or some of them at least, introduced us to new characters, it had so much potential, and that's why it's so hard to look back on. The direction they could have gone with the Knights of Ren, and they never even did anything with that. Who this Snoke guy was, the destruction of the New Republic, I say again, such wasted potential. It hurts. And that's why I have to put it lower in the ranking, because that potential went nowhere. And obviously the lightsaber fights weren't as good, but in the context of the story, them not being as good makes sense. None of the lightsaber duelists in that movie have the kind of training that you would have among prequel Jedi. So it belongs at number 8. I wish I could put it higher because it's a great movie on its own, but God, such wasted potential. And so that puts Solo at number 9. I really liked Solo. I saw it twice in the theater. Let me put that there. Yeah, great movie. Entertaining. I know they talked about it going in more directions. I think it works great as a standalone. I wouldn't say it really introduced us to anything new. We always knew that Han won the he won the Falcon from Lando, and we knew that Chewie owed him a life debt. I did kind of like the introduction of Han having served in the Empire at one point. That's kind of cool. Other than that, not much to say about it. Throwing Maul in at the end was kind of weird. As a Clone Wars and Rebels fan, it was cool to see, but again, for someone who's not watching those shows, like, whoa, what the hell? I thought Darth Maul died in episode 1 years ago. What's going on here? They're bringing him back? And then, of course, I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's the only Star Wars film that has lost money, so that's why it never really went anywhere. Would have been cool to see them wrap up the cliffhanger ending with Maul. They could have done it in a comic book or a novel or something, but whatever. Maybe we'll get it at some point in the future. I have doubts, but we'll see. So this is my crazy, controversial Star Wars ranking. Return of the Jedi at number 1, New Hope 2, Revenge of the Sith 3, Empire 4, Phantom Menace 5, Rogue One 6, Attack of the Clones 7, Force Awakens 8, Solo 9, Rise of Skywalker 10, Last Jedi 11. Feel free to comment your own ranking in the comment section below. That was a weird way to phrase that sentence. Let me know your thoughts on my own ranking. Like this video if you have to. I'll understand if you want to dislike it. That's fine. Subscribe if you want to see more Star Wars content. I do upload fairly regularly. And with all that said, have a great rest of your day.